Well, first of all, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us and for bearing with us on our little bit of a late start. I see a lot of familiar faces, but for the couple of you who are new, I'll say a couple of words about the Cyber Guild. We're a nonprofit organization, and we are dedicated to activating cybersecurity leaders and advancing women in cyber through education and community building. Facilitating discussions like what we're talking about here today is a big part of how we do that. I'm super excited for today's session. It's focused on digital safety and how we move people from fear to agency. We're taking a really unique look at something that I think a lot of us have been feeling, but we haven't necessarily talked about. Fear-based security culture. It doesn't work. It's not changing behavior. It's not building resilience. And in a lot of cases, it's making things worse. What Tiziana and Kurtis are going to walk us through today is how we can make that critical shift from fear to agency using real world threat intelligence, behavioral science, and the kind of practical habits that make a difference for individuals and organizations. I'm so excited to have both of them here. Tiziana is somebody that I've had the pleasure of knowing through the Cyber Guild, where she's been a longtime volunteer and a contributor to our blog and our other resources. She's a go-to-market strategist with 30 plus years of experience, bridging hands-on technical work with behavioral science and storytelling. Her current focus through SaferShift is about reframing cybersecurity as digital safety in a way that actually changes human behavior. And Kurtis is somebody I've had the privilege of knowing for over 20 years. He's built and sold a cyber threat intelligence company, GroupSense. He's a TEDx speaker. He's a regular voice in major media and on podcasts, and one of the most sought after ransomware negotiators in the world. He's a published author, and on top of all that, he's a volunteer and a mentor across our industry, helping everyone from career seekers to startup founders, and one of my favorite things, our most vulnerable citizens, the elderly, avoiding fraud. So a couple of very quick housekeeping things before we get started. Please stay on mute unless we call on you. If you want to jump in with a question or a comment, you can either use the raise your hand feature, or you can pop your comment or question into the Q&A, which we'll be monitoring, and we'll stop when we can. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Kurtis and Tiziana.
Oh. Thank you, Heather. And thank you everyone for making time to be with us today. For the purpose of the conversations, I really won't be using, I've got a few slides, but really, I really want to be a conversation, right? And so I'll pull them up as needed to, since I have a few of them for you. But let me begin by framing a little bit the conversation. And that is that, this session is really challenging the fear-based model that has been pervasive for our industry. I've been in this industry for over 30 years, and so that's always has been very much in my space, right? And so, unfortunately, the culture has relied on fear, shame, and actually punishment, right, to drive behavior. But that has been really ineffective, because the data consistently show that the biggest breaches have really been they've really been caused by the human element, right? So there is even just the latest Verizon data breach investigation report showcased that 62% of the breaches still have the human element at the center of it. So these sessions, we wanted to really kind of talk about, a shift, from fear to agency, that the industry needs to really become more empowering, and not just for the cybersecurity professionals, but for all that are part of the organizations, like, the finance people, the marketing people, and whatnot. So with Kurtis, who is clearly a ransomware negotiator, I really want to deep dive a little bit on his experience of him and what he has learned based on in
Fear.
situations, right?
Yeah.
So and clearly also want to lean into my own personal experience. So the goal is really here to leave you with concrete ways to reframe. It all starts with language and how we reframe the problem. Instead of calling it human risk, maybe call it human potential. So, so really wanting to explore that more in depth. So, with that said, my first questions actually to Kurtis, and we'll go back and forth here. But my first question to you, Kurtis, is like, what actually causes fear, and how does it show up in the industry?
Yeah, and before I answer, I just want to say I'm here in DC at Maryland technically at the National Harbor at the Gartner Risk Summit, Cybersecurity and Risk Summit, and you came by, Tiziana, yesterday. You saw hundreds and hundreds of these booths of companies saying, "Do this or they will get you." So I mean, it's pervasive. It's so common in the industry to have, we even have that phrase, right? FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And those are connected. And I think to answer your question, a lot of times what causes fear is lack of knowledge, just lack of understanding and lack of knowledge, not necessarily that there's actually a threat. And so that's when you combine, for example, the fear and uncertainty together, they're really the same thing a lot of times. The uncertainty is driving the fear, right?
Yeah, and in previous conversations, we kind of talked about, like you were saying, is like, sales, they, for practitioners, right? They really put you into that like fear-based frame of mind instead of trying to actually help you to solve the problem.
Right.
Instead of partnering with you in terms of like, okay, how can you manage your network more efficiently? They
Right.
come at it from, it's like, you've got to do this. and
Yeah.
and it is not a pleasant experience to be pressured into needing to do something.
No, and if you were going to stay in the context of sales strategy, it's also not a long-term strategy, because once the feeling of fear dissipates, or the thing that is potentially causing the fear goes away, the person's inclination to take the action also goes away, which is, we'll maybe talk later about, for example, like the anti-phishing training and things like that. The reason why a lot of times these people keep clicking is because the training really is focused on triggering behavior based on fear. And once the fear is gone, the human brain forgets about it. And so they'll repeat the action.
Yeah, and I mean, we can stay on that for a minute, right? Because
Sure.
cybersecurity awareness training is really fantastic for imparting knowledge. However, it utilizes jargon, and jargon doesn't stay with people because it is a technical term, right? So, I often speak to people about stranger danger. Don't open the
Mhm.
door to stranger. Do not take candies from stranger, right? And so that really brings a very primal example of how in the physical world we actually know not to open the door to a stranger. And so that is the same thing that actually happened in the digital world. So when you're clicking on a link from a stranger, you are practically opening the door to someone you don't know without validate them, right? And
Right.
giving them trust that it's not like onto your environment. And I personally feel that the industry has really failed to bridge that narrative between the physical world, because we know how to stay safe in our environment. We know how to be safe in our everyday life. And so, like, even the vendors have not really translated that knowledge into the digital world.
Yeah, and it's funny, when we were talking about this earlier, it reminded me of when I've given my sort of typical keynotes talks and things like that. One of the reactions I often got from people were, "Well, Kurtis, do we all have to become cybersecurity experts to function in life?" And my answer to that was always no, just like you don't have to be a doctor to know how not to die. Right? There's just some basic tools.
Yeah, and you know, in my experience in interviewing CISO and security professional, they often really fail to be able to explain it to the board and the business people. So yes, as marketing or as sale, we need to speak to the primary buyer, but it needs to be spoken in a way that they can easily translate it inside the
They
organization.
can socialize it beyond that conversation.
Exactly. So by us starting to shift the conversation away from jargon, away from fear, much more into business terms, we are actually empowering them and allowing them to really become advocate for a greater security culture.
Yep. Great.
So, Kurtis, what's been your experience as a ransomware negotiator? I mean, it's like you ingest the title, it's like, can you tell us a little bit about your experience, like when the house is on fire, what goes down?
Yeah. So for the audience, just because I don't want to assume anything, ransomware is, you probably heard of it. You probably know what it is, but high level, it's when a threat actor or a hacker breaks into your network and systems. The first thing they typically do is they take a copy of as much of your data as they can. They're going to use that as extortion later. Then they deploy a little bit of software on all the machines, and when they hit a button, it locks all the machines so nobody can use their computers. It produces a ransom note, which ultimately those ransom notes are very formulaic, and it will tell the folks that are being attacked to contact the bad guys. And that's become sort of one of my jobs, is to be the person that actually does that on behalf of the victim, right? Is to talk to or I say engage the threat actors on behalf of the victim. Now, sometimes the situation is pretty cut and dry. We absolutely have to make a payment, or this company is going to go out of business, or if it's a hospital, somebody might be harmed. So that, sometimes we're doing it for the obvious, like, let's just pay the ransom and move on. Many times, though, it's also to buy time. So the threat actors are also threatening to leak the data they took. We don't want them to do that, or we want to delay the time in which they do that. So we might have to notify people. We might need to warn people that data is coming out, and then also to gather intelligence from the threat actors. But in sort of in the context of this conversation, I think one of the things that surprised me about the role that, when I first started doing it, is that, and I've said this publicly quite a bit, the threat actors, the people that are perpetrating the ransomware attacks, they're pretty predictable for me. Like, I kind of know what they're going to do before they do it. I've seen all of their playbooks. These days, very seldom am I surprised by a threat actor's behavior. The victims, though, the clients that I'm protecting and working on behalf of, are all over the map, and a lot of it is because of fear. They're absolutely terrified. It's the worst day of their lives typically, and that sometimes is the hardest part of my job, is dealing with the victims and helping them through the situation.
Kurtis, I'm going to pause because Cindy threw in a quick question into the
Sure.
chat. She wants to know if you negotiate in English.
Yeah, it's almost entirely in English, although I have occasionally thrown in a Russian phrase. There's different tactics and why we do that. The threat actors don't always speak English as a first language, so they're typically using a translator, sometimes now AI, to talk to us. But yeah, most of it is done over a chat room in English.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about what is it like to negotiate with the bad actors versus the victim, and how do you see fear showing up, actually?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. I'm also doing a Cyber Guild talk this afternoon on negotiation fundamentals. And the first part of your question is, negotiation is a skill, and it's a bit of a science. There are processes that you can go through. There are different tools you can use, but they're fairly predictable. So that part of the job, talking to the bad guys and negotiating, is it's kind of repetitive. It's kind of the same playbook every time. And there's maybe, let's say, 2 or 3 dozen very active threat actor groups that are doing these ransomware attacks. I talk to the same ones over and over again. So I also know their playbooks, right? And they're all slightly different, but they're fairly predictable. And like I said earlier, on the victim side, it's not quite that way. The victims are all behave quite differently. Anything from, you'll have a stoic victim every now and then, but most of the time, they're pulling their hair out, they're freaking out. Some of them are crying. There's if we're talking to a boardroom of people, which in some of the larger cases we typically are, there's people yelling at each other. People are very much on edge, and that in order to drive the best result for them, I need to work around that and or help them unhook that a little bit so that they can think clearly, because that is one of the side effects of fear. Is it very much narrows your ability, your decision-making abilities. And that's just neuroscience. I'm not a doctor, but that's the way your brain is trying to protect you when you're afraid of something. And so getting them to get out of that state is also a bit of a skill.
Okay, thank you. And actually, I want to share like a slide that I have made here for you all, and that is, the concept of really what are some of the results of fear, right? It actually causes the freeze. Our industry, it's huge amount of pressure, and the pressure actually does, it causes shame. And we know that we don't perform very well where we're in a place of shame. And
Can I say something about shame too, real
go
quick?
for it.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah,
I
go
mean,
for it.
if there's a sort of a mental state that is worse than fear itself, it's shame. Shame is one of the most dangerous emotions a person can experience, because it's not it sort of shifts your mental state from focusing on an action to focusing on the person. So instead of saying I did something wrong, you're now saying I am a bad person, and that has a much bigger emotional effect on people.
Yeah. No, keep on going.
No, that's it. I just wanted to add that because I think shame is dangerous, and it's dangerous in these situations. One of the things that I had done a lot of is even in cases where I wasn't called in, I have been called in afterwards to talk to the CEO or the managing director of a charity or so on, to help unhook the shame, to explain to them that this happens to everyone. This is happening to people all over the world. Yes, maybe they made a mistake, but that doesn't mean they're a bad person. We've had cases where we were concerned that the person might harm themselves as a result of this, and so that's been something I've been asked to do quite a bit of, is try to help dissipate the feeling of shame for the people that were responsible for the organization during the attack.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the amount of pressure, I mean, there is really the burnout. It's really evident. Those individuals are really under amazing amount of pressure. And actually, if we just took a step back and empowered, and consider human as our firewall, a human firewall, or if we consider human as part of the stack that really needs empowered. Because even currently our cybersecurity awareness training really are compliance based. They're once a quarter. And, even with the phishing campaigns, right? It's like they send you the phishing campaigns, you get it one wrong and you get a pass, you get it twice wrong, you get another pass, third wrong, you go back to taking the whole training again. There is really no explanation on the change of behavior that's required. So it really, even the cybersecurity awareness training, it's really filled with shame.
It is. And certain vendors are worse than others. I'm not going to say it on here because this is going on YouTube, but there are certain vendors that I absolutely despise their methods because of what you just said.
Yeah, no, and absolutely, because it's like now there is some of them are really getting on with gamifications. They really contextualize it based on, so it's progressing. And one of the biggest things I personally think is really the narrative needs to shift, right? It's
Right.
like, because it really, and the jargon needs to kind of be moved away. So I think this is possibly a call to actions to the vendor community, to the marketing community, to the sales community, but just really a call to action for, partner with us as defender
Right.
of what's doing right. Um, Let me see. Can you talk a little? I think you did previously about the mental impact
Yeah.
and the burnout, right? And I know that Susan is here, and she often talks about the mental impact of it. But can you perhaps touch upon that? Um,
Yeah, sure. And I've spent a lot of time also helping build response planning for companies so that when this happens, they know what to do. And what I've incorporated into those response plans that I think is somewhat unique, is not typically there by default, and that is the human element of it. What After seeing so many of these cases, hundreds at this point, maybe a company does have a response plan. Their team has maybe even practiced the plan. They've done, what we call a tabletop exercise, where they've faked an attack and they've went through their plan and found the holes and fixed it. And I used to do a lot of those with companies. The one thing that they don't account for is burnout. And so if you've got a team that's sleeping under their desk for 2 weeks while they're trying to restore the network, and then you couple that with some form of fear, their fear of losing their jobs, the fear of this not coming back up, the fear that they might be blamed for it, the burnout happens quicker. So part of the stuff that I try to build in the plans is, one, rotating your team, having an auxiliary team available to you if that's a third party consultant, but then also as a leader conveying that, or basically taking away those fears, saying like, you're not going to get fired. You know what I mean? Like, and just having the conversation with because they're human beings. And so that does accelerate the burnout in a lot of cases. And I have had cases where, that team members just start resigning and not showing up and things like that in the middle of this incident. And it's a lot of accelerated because of fear. For the people who are running the organization, same thing. They're obviously terrified, and if you're a CISO, it's entirely plausible that you could lose your job after this is over. And that tends to, as I said earlier, it tends to narrow your view. Your brain will chemically reduce the number of options to a small number, and typically not the best ones. And so when you're making these critical decisions for the future of the company, and you're doing them out of fear, you've basically reduced your menu. And so part of my job is to help make sure that doesn't happen, make sure that they understand. And I think we talked about this before, Tiziana, when we talked before the call, but I think one of the things that drives fear almost by default, and maybe more than other things, is uncertainty. Humans hate uncertainty. It's natural. We don't like it. And the more of it there is, the more anxiety and fear we feel. And my job, often as a therapist for the ransomware cases, victims, was to remove some of that anxiety by just providing context and information to the victim. So just by sitting there and saying, this happens all the time. I talked to these bad guys last Tuesday. I know how they're going to behave. It's going to take this long. We're probably going to settle in this range, right? Now, it's still bad. Their network's still down, but if I even just take the time to spell out how this works, and that it's a common thing, and that I have done it before, and I'm still here. I haven't blown up. No bad guys have killed me yet. That reduces the anxiety and fear of the leadership immensely, just by providing information.
Yeah. And, Susan has put in the chat, it's like, just even acknowledging, and like just giving words to the elephant in the room is like, you won't lose your job. know,
Right.
recognizing that, we're dealing with this,
Yeah. Yeah.
regardless. And your job is not on the line. You're part of the solutions
Right.
of actually kind of getting this reinstated. I want us to shift a little bit about the elderly and the fear and the shame. I mean, we have now discovering that there is call center out of Cambodia, out of
Hmm.
Vietnam's, really going after our elderly. And with AI, those scenarios can really, like, it used to be that you had money where you were in a positions of power and they were coming after you. But right now, because those scams are so scalable and repeatable, it's just a matter of if your
It's a
data,
volume game.
yeah, it's a volume game. That's right.
Yep. Yeah.
So, in working with some of the elderly, can perhaps touch upon a little bit on that.
Yeah, and it actually, the scams themselves use fear as a primary tool to direct the person. The one of the projects I work on is called, we call it protective. It's the word protective without the E at the end. And what we do is we give seminars to retirees and clients of like high net worth wealth managers and things like that to basically do workshops to teach them, here's how to identify these scams. Here's often a lot of them don't even understand sort of the why behind them, like why is this happening, who's doing it. All that helps reduce fear, and it's information, less uncertainty. So we give them all of that, but then we teach them how to identify the scams and then what to do if they're actually impacted. Um, but to my earlier point, where when you're one of these scammers has got you on the hook, they maybe they have told you your kid's going to jail and then you have to deposit some money in a Bitcoin ATM. Anything that generates this fear, and again, it reduces that person's ability to think clearly about all of the options on the table. It's on purpose. And then the bad guys basically are creating the menu for you, and you can't think beyond those terms that they've given you, and they use that. Um, and then what happens, one of the things that's really dangerous about the scams is that when they're successful, and sometimes even when they're not, but you catch them in time, you're still embarrassed. There is a tremendous amount of shame and for the victims, and that's really dangerous. People do harm themselves, especially when you're talking about the sextortion type scams and things like that. So much so that I have gone out and found a therapist who specializes in victims of extortion and scams, and basically she's got a great set of YouTube videos, and maybe we can put it in the link when we post this, her videos, because they're great. Uh, but also I've referred some of these victims to her because I was afraid that they actually might harm themselves because of the shame they were feeling from the being exploited by the scam.
Yeah, and Larry put out there the romance scams, as well
Mm,
as, the teens. The teens now are being put under so much pressure, and even in the gaming,
mhm.
in the games itself. I mean, in my inquiring of, okay, AI is now here, what are you doing to protect yourself? What are you
Right.
doing to protect your family? What are you doing to protect your data? What I uncovered that a lot of the individual, even in the cybersecurity space, were really struggling to influence their family member to
Oh yeah,
be more
me too.
secure. Yeah, so it's really quite interesting, but I think it's because we don't have the language. If we shift towards a more primal language, if we shift towards a more relatable,
Mhm.
contextual language, we will have a much bigger impact as cybersecurity professional. I mean, the reactions I get when I talk about cybersecurity is immediately shut down. It's like, oh, And I think there is a perceptions that the enterprise will take care of it, the government will take care of it. It's almost like it's not my responsibility. It's actually, it's actually out there. It's not for me to do. And I think that we are at a time where the shift really is happening, where we need to go from fear to agency. And really, that's really what I mean by agency, is like where we need to have more agency over our own data, our own digital presence, our own. So I see Larry comment, yeah, our own cybersecurity. That's right.
Can I say a couple things? One is on the teens being impacted by the romance scams and the sextortion. I've had several colleagues that are very close with me call me, and their kids have been affected by these. And the first thing I tell them is, this is not the time to scold them. Like, as mad as you are that they've done these things, these stupid things that they should not have done, maybe sent pictures or something, this is not the time to scold them. You need to show them the utmost patience and love at this moment, because if you scold them, that increases the shame. And then that's when people start doing things like harming themselves. And so that's the guidance I've given there. And then if any of you have seen any of my talks before, I have a soapbox at the end of every one of my talks, which basically is what Tiziana was just talking about. And that is, I do believe that we have a personal responsibility for ourselves, but then, as a community, to take ownership of our own cybersecurity, and use the word agency, have an agency over our own digital risk.
Yeah, I kind of want to add a little bit about the romance scams, because I actually ended up being almost a victim of it. Being part of the cybersecurity space for such a long time, I knew better than to put my own personal data into an app, like, a dating app. And so, long and behold, like our cell phone has got so much data associated with us. I mean, our driver license and our address. So our cell phone number. So I have stopped giving out my own personal cell phone number out unless I know the person and I trust the person, right? I have created myself a Google Voice, but there is other services that can mask your own cell phone. Right. So again, it's that concept of everything is traceable now because everything is connected. So I'm like, no, I'm not giving out my personal cell phone number.
Well, guys, I'm feeling pretty special because she gave me her phone number. So,
well, you came through a very reputable organization, so it's like you get past there. Let me see where do I want to go from here?
Well, while you do that, Cindy, I saw your question. The FBI does, well, first of all, Verizon's DBIR has a really good report that shows the number of reported ransomware attacks. The FBI has a similar report. The problem is both of those reports have an asterisk in small print that say, these are the only ones that we know about. And we believe that like more than half are never reported. So we don't know what percentage, partially because of shame. Companies don't want people to know. And sometimes, because of, the impact on their constituents and things like that, they're trying to hide it. They're also sometimes worried that the government's going to get mad at them for paying the ransom, which, depending on whom they're paying, that is possible, because there are things with the Treasury Department and stuff that need to be checked before you go sending money to Russian criminals. So we don't really know, but it is definitely more than half. Like, it's most companies, I think, at this point, and the numbers are actually going up, not down, unfortunately.
So, I mean, I see, Larry, partially a generation to generation communication gap, question mark. Larry, can you perhaps elaborate on your question? Is it, you think it's just a generational gap?
Well, you were talking about influencing your family, and I started in the cybersecurity business in 1969 as a crypto facility inspector in Vietnam. So I've been doing this a fair bit. So if you're a sandwich generation person, you're going to deal with your teenage children who think you're the dumbest people in the world, and your parents who think you're 15. So there are some communication challenges due to that. And I just thought that was worth mentioning.
No, that's a fair observation, and yes, I think that's a difficult thing to do. And I think what Tiziana is saying is that there's some basic language that transcends even the generational sort of communication that could be used more frequently to get these points across. Am I right about that, Tiziana?
Yes, you got that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's why I talk about a primal language. Because it's, we have lived on this planet for many thousands of years, and we know how to be safe, right? We know to lock the doors, we know to lock the windows, we possibly have different layers, we have dogs, we have alarm systems, so we know that there is a certain level of things that we can control to kind of add layers and make it more difficult for a perpetrator. I shared a little bit about myself, like having a personal Google Voice number, but do you have like been in this space for a long time? I mean, what are some of your practices to keep yourself safe? And if anybody on the call has actually anything that they think that is worth mentioning, please chime in because we will want to hear them, right? It's only by sharing what we're doing that we actually learn from one another.
Sure. I think first I'll say that I don't think that I'm special. I think that the cybersecurity and digital protection, processes that I have are the same that I would expect everyone else to have. Maybe there's a couple things that I do are a little over the top because I do spend time, making Russian cyber criminals angry sometimes. So I have to be a little bit extra, but for the most part, it is just, your basic good cyber hygiene. And that is, not reusing passwords. I use a password manager. I highly recommend those, using multi-factor authentication everywhere I possibly can. One thing I think that maybe a lot of people don't do that I think I do is I refer to it as your personal attack surface. So if someone were to hack you as an individual, if a bad guy were to hack you as an individual, what would they have access to? Well, they might have access to your bank or some of the applications you use, some of the data that you have access to based on your job or something like that. Hopefully the two-factor authentication, things like that are preventing that. But that might be. But the other thing that they may gain access to, like for example, if they were able to compromise your phone, is your messages and your emails. And I used to be the type of person that said, well, Gmail is a giant search engine for mail, so I'm not deleting anything ever. I can always go back and find a message. I think that's a bad idea because I can tell you, I'm a really nice guy and I think I'm a really good person. I try really hard, but I'm not perfect. And if you had all of my emails going back 20 years, you could find things out of context that make me look pretty bad. Right? And so I have built in, a process where I purge messages. I do that with my text messages as well. They auto delete. And I haven't found that to be a problem. Like I'm not missing anything. That's, but I have built a process. And I think that's something that's unique that I do. The other thing is I do use a service that deletes all of my PII from the data brokers and things like that. I use Delete Me. There are several different kinds, but Delete Me is the one I used when I was running GroupSense, and we were trying to make sure the Russian criminals couldn't figure out where I lived. So the services like that are fairly inexpensive, and they just go out and remove your personal information off the internet continuously as it surfaces. But those are kind of the two unique things: is me deleting all of my back messages and then having a service that cleans the clear web for my identity information.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Larry was asking, what are some of the best practices for normal people traveling overseas? Do you need a special mobile number? My own personal practice is, yes, I do have a separate phone when I go to Europe. And also I VPN as much as possible. I always, my mobile and my computer, I always, use VPN. And sometimes I even choose my own IP, right? For whatever reasons, because I don't need to have anyone else know where I am on the planet. So I fix my IP. So that's my way of handling it. How about you, Kurtis? Do you have any
It
tips?
depends on the country, but yes, I have a separate phone. It doesn't contain any of my personal information. I recently went on a trip to Panama, and I took a separate machine which did not have access to my email or anything, and I can get to it through the web browser, but I didn't have the flat client installed. I didn't have messages downloaded and things like that because if there are cases where even at the border patrol they might open that machine. Also, you should leave your machine in the safe, but assume, when in the room when you leave, or just take it with you. But you should assume that they can gain access to that, especially in some of the other more nefarious countries. They will gain access to that and try to copy your hard drive. There's a little bit of a paranoid trick you can do too to determine that, and it's the clear nail polish trick. I don't know if you guys know this, but where you paint clear nail polish over the screws on the bottom of the laptop. And then if they actually use a screwdriver to unscrew those screws, you will be able to tell that they did that while you weren't there. That's a little bit paranoid, but I have done it in certain countries. I would also say I like you're using a VPN. Also use, even for calling, if you can, use an app like Signal. It makes it very hard for that country to spy on you and spy on your calls. So you can actually make phone calls from Signal to Signal, over that app, and it's just over IP. It's not a traditional telecom, circuit. So it's harder for them to intercept.
Indeed. Susan, do you have a question? Do I see you have a hand raised or no? Oh, okay. I got the personal message. Sorry.
Yeah.
She had to step away.
Okay.
So we've got the last 10 minutes of the conversation, and I'm going to share one more slide with you, and then I want to really open it up for questions to anyone on the room here with us today. So let me see here. So this is like, we've kind of talked through those, right? But I just wanted to say, it's like, if there is a fear-based approach, like compliance does instill judgment and fear, right? So we would definitely want to move to a knowledge that's empowering and actually provides them a sense of progress and improvement. Yes.
I was just going to say, the word empowering is kind of an important one too. I think when someone is subjected to the fear-based training systems over and over again, eventually and this is just a part of the human brain, it'll eventually put them in a condition where they no longer care because they feel like everything they do is a problem. And so they will stop trying. It will have the exact opposite effect of what you're trying to achieve with these programs.
Yeah, fantastic. So the behavior change through context and purpose, and is highly personalized, so it's relatable. I think that kind of really, it's one way how to instill agency or inspire, right? Inspire curiosity. I mean, that's really how we want to go from the continuum from fear to agency. It's like, it's not happening overnight, but it's really kind of instilling that curiosity to kind of take a little bit more ownership rather than just completely overwhelm them. The generic and efficient drills, like, they're not very effective. And the jargon, arcane, it just, people shut down. It's like, think about when you don't speak the language, right? You just kind of like, I don't understand, and And so again, explain it into plain language that is relatable for them. Silence when mistake can happen. I love what Kurtis said earlier, especially as it relates to the teens, not to make them wrong, not to make them feel shame, so that they actually do feel psychologically safe to share when incident happens. And then, I hear it over and over again, and it says, you are the weakest link as the human. The human are the weakest link. Well, how about if we just started talking about the humans are our first line of defense? Just shifting those slightly, reframing the things here, I think can kind of go a long way. So I'm going to stop sharing and open it up for comments or questions. And if there is no question.
Actually, I have a question. Curtis, you were mentioning using Signal to communicate. I know a lot of young people chat through Discord. They play games over Discord, and I was told any of those messages are not kept. Is that accurate?
I honestly don't know the back end of Discord, but I would not trust it for anything, for communication on anything critical. The Discord can be set up in by individual server basis, so it's not like a centralized service. So anyone can stand up a Discord server, and then they can. So while one Discord server might be run well and secure, and the person might have good intentions, another Discord server may not be that way, and so then you're subject to that person's cyber hygiene and their integrity to not look at your messages. And I would not trust it.
Good to know.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the WhatsApp is one of the other platform that a lot of people use, and that is renowned, not.
And it uses the same encryption as Signal. It licenses its encryption from Signal. Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay. So if there is, I'm gonna, Tiago, I wanted to say, I've been looking for a Google Voice alternative in Canada, but no luck so far. If I do find it, I will be sharing it with you. I know that there is a few providers that can match.
There's an app that I use to create fake accounts when I want to infiltrate a bad guy network or something, called Burner. And you can just create phone numbers with that, and people can call those numbers and text those numbers, and you'll get them on your phone. So it's not exactly the same as Google Voice. I actually don't think I've ever tried to make a call with Burner. I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can actually make a call with Burner, but you can receive them. And you can create new numbers a lot. So if you can just cycle through numbers. If you want to change it every time you meet someone, you can do that if you want. I wouldn't, that seems like a lot, but you could. Yeah.
So I want to leave you with something. So, and I'm just going to put it up there. And in case you have any questions, we can stay here for a few more minutes since we have it. But what is the one specific thing you will stop doing rooted in fear? And one thing you will start doing that build agency for you and the people you serve?
And that's directed at the audience, I assume?
Yes, absolutely. Well, unless you want to kind of answer it.
I'll have to think about that. I'm sure I'm doing lots of things rooted in fear that I need to change.
No, but really, I think the call to actions I would like to leave all of the audience here with is like, how are you going to inspire? How are you going to inspire people in your organizations? How are you going to inspire, and inspire curiosity, really, so that there is no shutdown, right? But acknowledging the fact that we are in an industry that is very pervasive of fear, and that there is a need to really involve, I want to say, the masses, because we all need to participate into defending, if it's defending the organization, if it's defending your own personal identity, your teens and things like that. So, just asking for, what is the one thing that you might be doing different that is not rooted in fear?
And also keep in mind that our adversaries, the threat actors overseas, the scammers, they are deliberately using fear as a tool to manipulate our behavior. Don't let them do it. So that's one of the things I like about the spirit of this talk is, take a step back and reframe it. Don't let them create your very small menu of options, right?
I love that, Kurtis. At the community builder, I will jump in and say one thing that I will start to do and work with the Cyber Guild to do, and that is to normalize sharing these attacks as they're coming in. And instead of having it be all about victim shaming, let's share what we're seeing, those crazy emails that are getting very good that are coming in. But if we start to share those amongst ourselves, and we understand that we're not the only one getting them and we're not the only one who almost clicked on them, that's really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think we will solve the problem in community. It's
all about community.
I don't know if you know Pavlina Pavlova, that's doing critical cyber, Heather, but that's what she's doing with the ransomware stuff.
Oh, awesome.
Where she's having
I would love to
the
know
community
her.
share their experience, so that everyone can see that it's not just them, right?
Yeah, I want to check out her work. I'm not familiar with her,
Yeah, she's
but
great.
It is. It's all about the community and all about sharing and raising each other up in this.
Yeah. And I think Helen West from I think is Shamrock.
Shamrock.
Project Shamrock. Yeah, I know Erin very well.
Yeah, she's doing amazing work in showcasing and really give airtime to all of the different scams and victims, and so she's been really amazing in terms of providing even like the incidents and the steps that are taken in that process of stealing our identity.
I don't know if you've seen her videos where she's actually gone to those compounds, and
did.
Yeah, they're crazy.
I mean, she has so much courage.
Yeah, it is scroll stopping whenever I see them. But that kind of awareness is what we need, because it is very easy to feel like it's a behind the screen problem and not a people problem. And thank you both for really humanizing this, because again, when we sit here behind our screens all day, you can get engrossed in that world. But at the end of the day, it's really about people.
So thank you, everyone, for giving us your
Good to see you,
time.
Cindy.
Thank you.
Thank you.